Hey folks, so this is probably a 10-minute video on the Ottman project. Um, if you are interested in Ken Wilber and you don't know where to start, I actually recommend this book very much. It's a foundational text for Wilber. Many of his modern philosophical ideas started with this text and started with this time period. So if you want to get a grasp on his later work and his general body of texts, this is a good place to start. And with that being said, one of the more, um, I guess you could say that in Wilber's history of philosophy, in his own personal philosophical evolution, this is a turning point. Wilber differentiates himself from the Romantics and from the perennialist philosophy, and really begins to articulate and develop the evolution of consciousness. His main distinction between himself and the perennialists is basically that instead of seeing our primordial state as a kind of heaven or unconscious union with the divine, he sees it as an unconscious hell. And he often uses the example of a child in the womb. Instead of being a blissful state of connection with the ground of being, this is actually an unconscious disconnection with everything. And a non-differentiation with the world. The conscious union, the revelation of union with spirit or union with the ground of being only comes after the self develops. And this is his distinction, and it's what he sums up to be the pre-trans fallacy, mistaking pre-states, such as a child in the womb or the innocence of a child or nature, for being transcendent states. So it's basically confusing the two. Now he claims that Jung and Campbell and others have done this. I don't think Jung has done this as much, but basically the distinction I think is based off a misinterpretation of the esoteric schools, that the traditionalists and the perennialists, which he claimed to be one of them, do not really convey the child in the womb as the literal ground of being. They are referring to a mystical state, a transcendent state, or you might put it a transcendent reality in which there are multiple dimensions and multiple realities of the divine. You might even call them realms of being. And these realms exist independently of physical reality. Those of you who are familiar with, say, shamanic practices are actually more attuned to this kind of cosmology, one in which a practitioner can enter altered states, visit these realms, visit these beings, obtain wisdom from them, navigate them, and so on and so forth. So this transcendent reality is really what the mystery schools, the mystics, the perennialists, and traditionalists are speaking about. Now, often they aren't the forefront or the focal point of what these schools speak about. They're more of a passageway to the ultimate, to the divine, to the union with self and the Godhead, which is at the heart, a return to the source. But between the source and physical reality is a slew of dimensions and realms, which are very often spoken about, and seem alien to our modern standards, which really don't look at this stuff at all. So this is basically where Wilber differs from many esoteric schools and practices, which are claiming that, yes, these realms are real, and people go through them, and our soul exists originally from a higher state, a higher dimension, and has fallen into time, has incarnated, and thus the path of the soul is born as we are born and die and travel back and learn lessons and return to our divine state, to come full circle, only having first lived our lives. So there is somewhat of a more comprehensive look that the perennialists have about the divine and about these ultimate realities. But as a philosopher, I don't know why or how, but Wilber does not go into these subjects. He does not study the esoteric, especially the Western esoteric, minus a couple of mystics and Christian mysticism. But not that he denies the esoteric. It's just that he relegates it often to the birth of the universe, and involution, the descent of the divine into matter, as being something that was before the Big Bang, that was at the beginning of the universe, the beginning of creation, and is somehow underlying creation, but isn't necessarily this kind of complex cosmology in the way a shaman would imagine it. And because of this, Wilbur's work probably has become easier to understand because it focuses mainly on cognitive and physical development, with the spiritual only coming after, rather than a multidimensional reality in which spirit and matter and evolution are all interpenetrating. Now, the perennialists did have trouble with this physical world because they realized that this physical world is the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more realms and dimensions and complete expressions of the source that are available to us, and and in which that we belong, that we can reattain a state closer to God, and that we can achieve this through the initiatic practice and process. Um, so this is a dimension that is missing from Wilbur's work. You will not find it in his work. So you can look for it if you want, but it's basically missing. For this, you probably have to study, unfortunately, many more obscure texts and harder to read authors. Rudolf Steiner is a good place to start. William Irwin Thompson is another good place. Many of the traditionalist philosophers are also good, but then again, they are very academic. So any other contemporaries, in my ignorance, I don't really know too many, but one such author is B. Alan Wallace. And what he's doing right now is working with scientists to sort of map out this cosmology and suggest that there are other dimensions. And one of his books is actually called Hidden Dimensions. So he's preserving it, at least. But Wilbur does not really delve into the esoteric and mystical dimensions. And because of this, what can we say about Wilbur? Well, he's certainly not a mystic. He's a practitioner. He is certainly a visionary. He is a profound thinker. Um, Definitely a meta thinker. He's able to put all these complex things together, extremely philosophical and intellectual. But for the mystical and the subtle and the feminine and the multidimensional, it's difficult to find that in the work. So keep that in mind. This is kind of a primer for you, for those who are interested at least, in Ken Wilber's work. You may not find it necessary, because for the most part, our development in time and space has to do with the development of the physical and mental body. Um, but without acknowledging this otherworldliness, this other dimensional aspect, we are actually neglecting a huge component of the perennialist philosophy in which Wilber's work is based, and even Sri Aurobindo, who Wilbur claims to be heavily influenced by. So this kind of Gnostic, mystical, or esoteric aspect to Wilber's teaching is missing. Not that it's not somewhat present, but it is not explicit, and it's not. It's taken very literally. Like, for example, the whole baby in the womb, so on and so forth. So keep that in mind when you're reading Wilbur. And for the rest of his work, sure, it's great and comprehensive, and it gives you the general direction of the physical universe, but there is more to it than that. And okay, that's about it for today. Thanks for listening.